So I'm really happy today to welcome to the show Cliff Fluet. He's a partner at the law firm Silkin. And today we're going to look at sort of digital music from a legal perspective and also look into the world of brand and content, as Cliff is a real expert in this particular field. So it's a real pleasure to have you on the show, and thanks for coming on. And how's it going today?
Very good indeed. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with sort of the most pressing concern of the music industry at the moment in terms of legal issues. So ever since the beginning of the digital music era in the sort of 2000 up to 2010, the legal question has been a central part of the debate. But in the first kind of decade, it was all revolving around music downloads, copyright infringement, music piracy, and these words have been taken in by the mainstream as well, by the media. Lots of people know about them. Now there is a new question, and it's all revolving around cloud services. And this has been something that cropped up in the 2000s, but it's really becoming a key issue now because lots of major companies are actually thinking of launching these services, and Amazon is the first player to actually have done so. What is the legal situation revolving cloud lockers at the moment? And do you think that Amazon is on a decent standing with what they've done?
Okay, unpacking all of that. You talk about for the first 10 years, it really has been about selling copies, effectively digital versions of CDs being sold via retailers and creating an environment for that to happen. Now, way back when, in sort of like the mid-90s, people talked about a celestial jukebox where music would just be pulled down from anywhere. And that's effectively a description of where we're at now in terms of a cloud service. One of the difficulties about cloud services is that it does cover a whole panoply of different types of services. One could argue, by one definition, that Spotify is a cloud service. There is a central server where you pull things down, but you pull things down so quickly and in such an efficient way, it feels like it's local. So we're effectively moving off the hard drive, off to a central hard drive somewhere in the cloud. That's down to it. What's not helpful is that in the same way that the words MP3 became synonymous with illegal, it wasn't. It's just a file type, set by the Motion Picture Group. That's why it's MP3 and or 4. But it became synonymous with being illegal. Cloud services does create this whole question of what do they mean? And really, you've hit onto the point. It's locker services. It's, can I have my own hard drive available virtually, remotely, and pulled down versus various devices? Now, at its most simplistic argument, people are just saying, look, it's like having some really, really big speakers. My PC or my Mac may be in my loft, but I want to be able to listen to it in my garden. And that's the same as opening the window and blasting it out or doing it. There's nothing new there. There's no new use. I'm just having my own collection pumped through a different set of speakers. Other people say, well, no, I'm sorry. It's a new use. You're making it available. And actually what you're doing is that you're undertaking a substitutional activity. Whereas you might have bought it via another route, we are now effectively in a world where instead of having 5 subscriptions or 3 different players, you'd only have one. And there is a massive danger that if you look at how you buy music now, part iTunes, Spotify subscription, Napster subscription, some DVDs, some via, subscribing to Sky-based services. If you only had one ubiquitous service, then there is a real danger that the market could contract. On the flip side, however, if you can do more and more and more licensing deals that way, and you monetize music everywhere, everyone could win. So that's why everyone's really, really focused on it. Cloud services can be licensed. If you look at things like Sony's Curiosity, everybody knows that there are various conversations from big players about cloud-based services. Most of them are doable. The classic one is a scan and match, where it scans your record collection. There's me aging it. It scans your CD files that you've got. It matches it under a license basis and makes it available virtually. You can get those kinds of licenses. It's not easy, it's not cheap, but music licensing never was, but it is doable. One of the biggest issues that people have, and to be, in many ways, it's a hangover from the decade before, and rights owners, particularly publishers and a lot of labels saying, okay, I can get my head around a scan and match service, or I can scan and then you make it available, and there's another model for making it available, and I'm monetizing that. But how do I know that you legitimately bought that music? The consumer says, I bought it, I own it, I have the right to listen to it any way I want. The argument goes, hang on, chances are that you have... I'm not going to defame a whole bunch of people, but what I'm saying is that there is an opportunity here that you may have created a massive collection through huge amounts of downloading, entire discographies downloaded from illegal sites. Your argument that you should be able to listen to those things any way you want falls over. It's not legitimate. And therefore, the labels are putting on different obligations upon those who want to offer this platform to say, right, if it's bought from iTunes, if it's been bought legally, or there's some kind of metadata, or there's some kind of identifier that says it's been bought legally, yeah, we can come up with a model. But the whole just scan your collection and then make it available is difficult for us. It's really, really, really tough for us to get our head around that. Yeah. And that's where it's falling over. So you could see how someone like iTunes could mean that if you bought it from iTunes, that you can make it available on various devices. But remember, the way that iTunes home sharing works, you can already. You can make it available on up to 5 PCs already. So there's effectively a form of cloud service right there. So the functionality's there. It's the licensing. And how do you make it available in a really compelling way that is much more interesting to consumers than it is to lawyers? Now, back to your original question about Amazon. Amazon's position, and again, remember that it's only been launched in the US, and the US has different rules in relation to private copying and fair use and those kinds of things. And from what I read in the press release, Amazon's saying we are within our rights legally for people to make backups, and that may well be the case. But it's the backups is the one thing. It's the streaming it to X many devices, as it were, that's the bit that they should need a license for. And our understanding is that they're actively engaged in lots and lots of dialogue to try and make that happen. Yeah. I think that Amazon, given the fact that the Kindle in many ways got Apple really, really, really motoring on the iPad, Amazon are now seeking to innovate and take things forward and be seen to be sort of owning the thought leadership space and charging ahead, but not doing it in as aggressive a way as, say, the first iteration of YouTube, which basically just had stuff up there for a very, very long time before complying with its DMCA obligations as it does now.
Well, one side of the Amazon story that was interesting was the fact that they sent this fairly bullish letter out to the labels before the service was launched, but then they actually started seeking help from the labels to gain those licenses, because at the moment people actually have to upload their own music. It takes a huge amount of server space. It must cost a lot of money as well to maintain. But they do need these licenses in order to be able to stream the one track from one server to everybody that has that track. So that was seen by many in the press as sort of a misstep on Amazon's part as well.
I can't comment really as to Amazon and sort of the order within which they did it, but if you are launching a new service that is new to the market and is innovative and compelling to consumers, let's just break this down, forgetting about music. Amazon are the masters of selling new services online. They are better at it than anybody else in terms of productizing, not music, and they've done it for ebooks. They have created an entire market which led to iBooks and everybody else. Amazon and Kindle and the device and the shape of the device and the color of the device has been transformational. So one could argue that these guys are past masters at showing you what consumers want. And it's often very difficult when you've got a brand new product to the market. You almost have to prove its concept and its desirability before you can then go and get the licenses. I've been in many conversations where people with brand new services have gone to rights owners and said, we want to do this, and people want to do that, and they want to download it to this. I remember way back when I used to work for Warner Music, a company came to us, and basically their proposition was YouTube. And the rights owners go, I don't get it. I don't believe people will sit and watch music videos at their desk at lunchtime. I don't get this. I don't get that. So it's very difficult for any new platform without that chicken and egg cycle to say, right, well, what we have to do, we have to show there's a desire, we have to show there's a market, we have to show that there is a model, and then go and get the licenses. The question is do you announce it or do you launch it? And it feels like Amazon have sort of soft launched it and announced it and are now seeking to try and create a really compelling opportunity.
Moving on from this into sort of a similar argument, the relationship between labels and startups has been an interesting one for the past few years. And on the one side, the labels started out by trying to make as much money from the startups as possible right at the outset, so demanding fairly high payments in order to license the music in the first place, which kind of prevented some companies from ever having the chance of becoming profitable, because it was really hard for them to do the upfront payments and then keep paying the licenses as well before turning a profit. So most of them ended up, sort of going away slowly. But now the attitudes have changed, and naturally the labels are looking at the long term and trying to understand how these companies are going to make their money in the next 10 years, for example. So do you feel like that is a shift that felt throughout the industry in terms of how the labels feel they can license their content and try to be a bit more adventurous as to how they do it?
Well, being as old as I am, to be honest, and in defence of the labels and the rights owners, I would argue they started out being very, very adventurous. In the early 2000s, people were prepared to grant non-precedential licenses, often for very, very little upfront payment. Let's give you a short-term license. Let's experience whether or not this model works. Let's understand it. Let's walk together. In my view, and it's a personal view, is that some people tested that by basically launching, having conversations with rights holders but never closing them, and then they sold out, sometimes for tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars and or pounds, depending on the service. That's when the attitude of the rights owners changed, which is, hang on, if I'm not going to sue you, or I'm not going to license you, but I'm going to sort of tolerate you, and then you turn around and sell effectively on the back of all of my catalogue, that's when things changed. In the mid-2000s, when that was going on, people said, So therefore, if you're going to basically license my content and then sell out for millions and millions, I'm either going to want a huge upfront advance, or I'm going to want equity, or in some cases both, as a way to make sure you guys just don't check out and take out all the money before we do. Now, with the seizure of funding in 2008, decreasing sentiment for music, and a difficulty in order to raise finance, and VCs being a lot less adventurous, those big checks have just dried up. Now, you also talk about actually some of the businesses folding because they weren't able to make a profit. I think it's because a number of them, the business model or the business just wasn't there. I think it's very, very easy to say, you know what, if we'd got the licenses for free, we'd have been able to make a fortune. Well, I can do that, so anyone can do that. But if you look and stare at the number of services out there that really fell over based upon high upfront, and they were just about to make a ton of money and everyone really, really liked it before the labels pulled the plug, I haven't seen that many of those. So I'm kind of deaf and blind to that argument. The argument I am alive to is that the attitude of all rights owners, and it's not just major label, it's many indie labels and or publishers. And of course, in order to get these things licensed, you have to have everyone bought in at the same time. And again, there's a very interesting blog from Michael Robinson of mp3tunes.com, who, beyond whatever you think of MP3 Tunes and their attitude to licensing, they're at least trying to do that. And they've basically finally put out into the open what really is the issue, which is you may have a service which does X, but then because the different labels and the different entities and the different headquarters have different concerns, you end up in a kind of consensus, lowest common denominator type offering. So you can have what could have been potentially game-changing opportunities, like, for example, something like Nokia's Comes With Music. The first iteration of that, and what they first wanted to do, and where they could end up, because they had to go through basically the least worst deal from everybody. That's very interesting. Or if you look at Virgin Music, who are rumoured to be finally closing a Spotify deal, that's not without having tried for a good 4 years, including doing massive things for the BPI, like writing to consumers and being seen as a very responsible rights owner. And the same with Sky Songs. Those services were going to be game-changing, and they had the money and they were prepared to be licensed. But they were kind of knocked into shape by the licensing conversations and made to be far less compelling than they wanted to be. Those are the services. So I don't think it's an issue of the advances necessarily. I think it's how adventurous are people going to be in terms of working forward. You know, Sky are a brilliant company. They know how to sell things that nobody else has sold. HD, 3D. In my personal view, if Sky came to me with a compelling proposition around music, I'd probably listen. If you look even at how News Corp have made, you know, people pay for newspapers, how they made people pay for television, how they made people pay for sport, all those things that were free before, they've done it better than anybody else. But when they went to the labels said, no, it's got to look like this, it's got to look like this, and it's got to look like this. And we need all to say, if someone comes to us with a brilliant idea, probably the best thing not to do is say, well, if it looks like that other idea, we'll license you, because you lose the uniqueness.
Moving on to brands and bands, brands and music, this has become an important source of revenues for both labels, bands, publishers, a whole host of people working in the music industry. So brand and content has evolved into a way to not only strike a partnership, make some money up front, but also a way to promote the band, be able to sell content around that brand partnership. And so that created a situation where the brand and the band or the label become on more equal footing than they were before, in a way. So how has this evolved? Like you've seen this, you know, in the past 10 years. How has this evolved, and how do you see the situation working out now?
So the situation has evolved very much from a primary source of income was synchronization income for films, but increasingly for advertising. When was the last time you heard an ad without music in it? You know, it just doesn't happen. And as advertising has grown and has gone online, etc., you know, it's an increasingly important revenue stream. Also, what's very important about it is that it's moving from a B2C model, and we've talked at length about the challenges of selling music to consumers, to a B2B model, where effectively to other businesses. And that's great, you know, for a particular brand, you know, to pay £100,000 to have your music in their ad for 3 months. That's good money. That's great. It's premiumized, it's exclusive, it creates a halo effect, it helps promote the band, and also is really important for the music industry as a revenue stream. So that's really, really important, and that's great. And the kind of music in ads thing, that's going to last a very, very, very long time. Well, so brands can be, indeed, and you know, everyone sort of talks about the Bacardi Groover model thing, but increasingly you can very much see a world where brands will start paying or you know, sort of contributing towards artists' development. I think that we're going to see something a lot more like in the world of sport. If you look and see how major brands effectively sponsor promising athletes from a very early age, you know, they start off giving them shoes and free clothes to them being the first ones to badge them, and then when they become enormous, they develop a relationship with them like Woods had with his brands, or Rooney had with his brands, or Murray's got with his brands that's set from the beginning. We're going to see a lot more of that. So I think that brands are going to be really important. And why? Because they've got the money, and there is an opportunity to have a genuine two-way relationship. The brand gets the artist's endorsement, it gets its power, it gets its sexiness, it gets access to the fan base. The artist gets money, it gets a platform, and gets funding in order to do fantastic thing. And the great thing is they can upfront fee and sponsorship for their tour, and a bunch of free clothes. That's a good deal. It's a very, very good deal. So that is going to happen more and more and more. Yeah. The rights conversations, however, make it extraordinarily difficult at times. And I think that for, you know, the people out there and my clients and those who are rights owners, is that being as difficult as they are, or making things as complex as they are, or things being necessarily complex, mean that more and more the brand is saying, you know what, if you're an artist signed to a label, let's get a picture of you, you know, let's get a picture of you holding a piece of the product, let's get a picture of you, let's work with your tour, let's not use your recorded music rights, let's just give you the money direct, which is not great for the record labels, it's not great for the publishers, and not great for the music industry. So if we can get the brand and their labels and the band working in partnership, everybody wins.
So how do you feel, I have read about a few deals that were made, I won't name any names, in terms of brands partnering with labels directly at the moment. So I was kind of interested in seeing how those deals work, because I'm not sure whether nowadays the opt-in is worked into the artist contracts if the label makes a deal with the brand, or whether the label then has to go and convince the artists that brand partnership is the right for them.
So it really depends. So many brands think, the route to the artist is going to the label. Well, as we know, it could be the manager, it could be the artist direct, and the truth is you need to get everybody's buy-in, not just one party's buy-in. Over the last 3 or 4 years, most labels have set up a brand partnerships division, and they're honestly and diligently trying to bring opportunities in. But because of the vast majority of contracts out there, when you broker a full assignment of copyright, the artists get these things that felt very easy at the time you were negotiating, all these approvals. Now those approvals mean that the label then has to go and convince the artists, and it's often not so much about would you like to do a deal with insert trainer brand here. It's more on the basis of who's going to get the money, does it go to your unrecouped balance, what aspect of it is to do with the music. Artist goes, hang on a second, there's 100 grand on the table, that should come direct to me. Label goes, no, I brought it in, and remember that big bill we've got from that album that's unpaid. And a lot of those conversations do fall over. And if I'm being completely honest as well, there's a bit of not invented here going on. When an artist gets something from their label, a lot of the time I observe they say, no, we're not interested, because the label's brought it to them. Whereas actually if the brand had gone to them direct, they go, yeah, we're up for that. However, so I think that people just need to be more grown up about the opportunities, working in partnership and understanding, look, let's see if the proposition is right, and then we can have a very grown up and thoughtful conversation about money.
And another problem is that in those partnerships is that because of the difficulties that some brands are finding in making deals with major artists, they are turning into the independent sector to actually find talent to showcase with their brand, which is a great opportunity for the independent sector actually at the moment. Do you see any pitfalls in that, in the sense that maybe the artists that enter into these agreements are not quite as backed up and experienced as or don't have enough legal counsel as maybe a major artist would have?
One could argue the same about the deals that they enter into anyway. I mean, so I'm sort of less able to comment about that. You are right that there are some brands who just say, look, dealing with major labels or dealing with established artists is too difficult, too expensive, or all of the above, and therefore they'll look to baby bands. I think that there is a very easy caricature that brands are there to exploit. They use the word exploit, and that's used pejoratively, that they're effectively being somehow exploited or are on some sort of plantation. Brands rarely enter into a negotiation thinking, we can get the full assignment of the recorded music rights and therefore we'll screw them over when they... That's not what they're about. Brands really genuinely want to shift more product, change the sentiment of their consumer, give their consumers a good experience, or all of those sorts of things. So I think that, and to be honest, they're probably a lot more alive to the creative needs of the band than some labels are. So I think that there is a very, very healthy relationship and almost an equality of bargaining power as well, because the brand is bringing more than just money to the opportunity, and one could argue that it is as successful, or sometimes in some cases more successful, an opportunity than signing to some indie where you've signed your rights and by the way you've had to give away all your publishing as well, on an ongoing basis, including all of your copyrights for a certain amount in perpetuity. Now there are some indie labels out there that put those sorts of deals down. I'm not aware of many brands doing that. So I think like ever, you always need good lawyers.
And do you believe that it's possible through legislation to regulate piracy at this point? I mean, there have been a lot of attempts throughout the world. We all know about them. We know that the Digital Economy Act in the UK has just passed its last hurdle, sort of last month, because the claims by the ISPs were rejected, and it looks like it's going to go ahead, and the first letters are going to start going out early next year. From a legal standpoint, do you think there is a way of creating a legislation that is is foolproof?
I think the history, I mean, I've talked about this at length before, and I think I was quoted, and it's somehow become extraordinarily re-quoted quite a lot, where I said that, the whole piracy game is a game of mole whacking. The whole whack-a-mole online or circus game where you just knock one down and another one comes up. And the moment you make it more and more difficult, the more concerted pirates will look to go to dark nets, will go to lockers, sort of unlicensed lockers and virtual private networks. And for those who are really, really determined, you're not going to be able to stop them. And it was always this way. I think that there is a much more interesting world where you monetize use at the moment it's used rather than the moment it's actually downloaded, where the future of the industries will go. And if services like Beyond Oblivion can deliver what they're saying, effectively drawing some boundaries around the entire use network and then monetizing it, that's very, very interesting. The history of legislation trying to change consumer behaviour, or indeed young people's behaviour or young consumers' behaviour, is not a great one. If you look at the prohibition model in terms of drink, in terms of drugs, in terms of sex, using drugs is as illegal now as it was 20 years ago, yet the use is exactly the same. So I'm not wholly convinced that making it illegal, or indeed it's illegal already, so I don't know how you quite make it more illegal. It's a binary thing. But in this world where we're trying to make it even more illegal somehow, or we're stepping up the fines, or we're going to have the angry letters, as it were. And the pragmatist and the commercial beast in me says, look, if there are people out there desperate to consume you, you should be looking at them as future consumers rather than necessarily threatening to sue them. I'm not sure that's extraordinarily smart. However, what you do need to do, I think, is just have a much more interesting, varied ecosystem where services match what people do and how they use it. Because let it be clear, those same young people who will, download music, they won't wear fake clothes, or that seems, they're wearing off rip-off jeans, or they're ripping off. There's a real sort of social shame around it. There's no social shame to using it. So if you can monetize that behaviour rather than seek to make it more illegal, I'm not wholly convinced that there's any piece of legislation that's going to change behaviour in that way. I'm just not.
Yeah. And I wanted to finish by asking you. You see a lot of deals coming through. You know a lot of what's in the works and things that have gone past in the last few months. So what is it that is exciting you most about the evolution of the entertainment and the music industry at this point, in terms of either brand partnerships or new services coming on the market?
On the digital media side of things, I still think that people are too focused on content and without understanding the value and the power of context. Now, if you look at Facebook, that is a classic context rather than content business. It knows where you are, it knows what you're doing, it knows what you're buying, because they'll be relaunching Facebook credit soon. They can scan your status updates and see exactly what's going on. Once that's mapped onto a music service sufficiently well, and there are some very, very interesting people I'm working with who are looking to do those kinds of things in terms of looking to understand further and being able to monetize that, that's really, really interesting. So I think that's terrifically exciting. And I'm also interested to see how, the cloud is now it's now a reality. Looking forward to those services coming along and just saying, right, so once they're set up, that should just be the beginning. How do we make sure that same thing is available in the Wi-Fi hotspot in the car? How do we make sure that is captured in terms of where people are doing, and how do people? Should we be focusing less on what services can offer and how consumers want it? And if we focus on how consumers want it, the more innovative ways, there's more opportunity to do more deals. So there's some very interesting proposals that I'm seeing that go in that direction. On the brand partnerships side as well, brands are becoming more and more audacious in terms of, some of them are setting up studios. If you look at what's going on, I do a lot of, on the televisual side, advertiser-funded deals. There are some very, very interesting and creative shops opening up, which are going to be using music and content and sport and talent in very, very new ways and looking to monetize them. Some fascinating platforms that are operating there. So it's people are doing stuff, which is great and very, very exciting.
Well, it was great having you on the show. I'm going to throw a couple of links on the show as well. There's a really cool video of your presentation you did at MIPTV on YouTube that I think people should check out. And, well, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrea.